Take this and get out of here. My mother-in-law shouted as she handed over divorce papers. She, who believes I'm just a housewife, has become very aggressive. I feel pity for her, being deceived by my husband's lies. I took the divorce papers, struggling to hold back laughter, and left the house. I wonder what will happen next. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm Kelly, and I am 26 years old. I've launched an online education business to help people learn skills that will allow them to work from home. That's right, I'm the CEO. Most of the business is left to my employees, and I currently work at my own pace from home. I married Brian 2 years ago. Brian tells people that he has an important position at a major company, but he's actually just a contract worker doing odd jobs there. Moreover, he's been telling people I'm a housewife. He says, although she does have an income, she's hardly active, so it's basically the same as being a housewife. At home, Brian treats me as a simple housewife and doesn't help with the household chores at all, even though I'm also working when he's at work. But Brian doesn't seem to understand that at all. He says, out of respect for your husband, I want you to forgive my white lie. But because of these lies, I'm harassed by my mother-in-law, Brian, who excels at his job and is our pride. Why did he marry a jobless woman like you? My mother-in-law, misunderstanding and thinking I'm just a housewife, often visits unannounced and criticizes me like this. I've repeatedly explained to her that I go to work and do the household chores too, but she just mocks me in response. You're really just relaxing all day, aren't you? And what's with this housework? If you're going to tell a lie, at least try to make it convincing. Of course, I've talked to Brian about her sudden visits, but he just says, just ignore what an old person with time on their hands says. It seems like it's not really his concern. He only contributes $500 to our household expenses, keeping the rest for himself. I pay the rent and add about $4,500 to our household budget, but it's still not enough each month. Brian spends it recklessly. Despite the fact that I am the one supporting the household, he lies to others saying that I don't work and doesn't protect me from my mother-in-law's sarcasm. However, I haven't been able to bring myself to decide on divorce. That's because Brian once supported me. Brian and I were classmates in college. Back then, I was tormented by Allison, a dominating woman. She disliked that I was thought of as better than her, despite being modest. I think it's natural for someone who studies hard to be evaluated highly, but Allison didn't seem to think so. Because of Allison's childish harassment, there was a time I even hated going to college, but I managed to graduate thanks to Brian's support. He also helped me launch my online school business. When I almost broke down from overwork at a busy company after graduating, he encouraged me saying, why not do a job that utilizes your strengths? You can do well by yourself. Thanks to his support, I was able to achieve a work style not bound by time and place. I am who I am now because of Brian's support. That's why I think I have to put up with him a little. I'd like a divorce, but can I really go through with it? I was pondering this when I accidentally found something shocking on SNS. I stumbled across a post that read, my beloved boyfriend bought me the latest brand bag, accompanied by a photo of a luxury bag and a man's hand. The man was wearing a luxury brand watch, the same model I had given to Brian, a limited edition. The user who posted this was, could it be Allison? I'm not connected with Allison on SNS, but because we have mutual acquaintances, her posts often appear in my recommendations. Looking at her past posts, there are several suggestive photos that indicate it's Brian. Allison must know that Brian and I are married. Because of our many mutual acquaintances on social media, it's highly likely she's seen my posts. And yet, she dares to post such photos. Is this a challenge to me, or just thoughtlessness? Either way, she's clearly underestimating me. I've been grateful to Brian and have put up with a lot, but I can't forgive infidelity. With this, I finally feel ready to decide on divorce. I immediately contacted a detective agency to investigate Brian. They soon found a lot of obvious evidence. Brian said he was attending a business school to become a full-time employee, but in reality, he wasn't attending at all, just hanging out with Ellison instead, and using my money to do so. To think, an affair with Ellison. Though somewhat surprised, I felt disappointment rather than anger and a strong sense of relief at the chance for divorce. I secretly signed a lease for a new apartment to live alone and started moving my belongings little by little, preparing for the divorce. When I was almost ready, Brian cheerfully said, "I've been selected to participate in an employee training camp. I'll be gone for a week from next week." I knew the reality was that he was planning a luxurious trip with Allison, and that this was just another lie. I was anticipating what excuse he would use. It's rare for a contract employee to participate in an employee training camp, but it sounded plausible enough. Classic Brian, a master of lies, I thought as I calmly observed him talking about how wonderful the training camp would be. Time passed, and Brian happily left for his so-called training trip. I was planning to finalize my divorce preparations, but the moment I started packing, the doorbell rang. It was my mother-in-law at the intercom, visiting and announced again. "Look, Kelly, Brian gave me this as a present." She barged in, showing off the same luxury brand handbag Ellison had posted on social media. "This is the latest model. He said it's a thank you for always helping out." "What has Brian given you recently, Kelly?" she asked. I had no choice but to reply, "Actually, I haven't received anything." "Of course you haven't. You're living off Brian's earnings without doing anything after all. You don't deserve presents, do you?" she mocked. She joyfully talked about receiving the latest appliances and how Brian had paid for renovations at her house. All with my money. The money I put towards the household expenses was being filtered to my mother-in-law and Allison. However, I mostly manage my income separately, so it's not a big problem. I ignored her words, but she seemed displeased and demanded, "Kelly, are you listening?" I reflexively replied, "What do you mean?" Her face turned red with anger. "How rude of you to ignore me," she yelled, and to my surprise, she took out a set of already completed divorce papers from her bag. "I never liked you. Living comfortably off Brian's earnings without doing anything. What kind of wife are you? Have some shame," she screamed, throwing a pen at me. "You've been living for free as a wife all this time. Sign this and divorce from Brian right now. We can manage economically without you. In fact, it'll be a saving for us," she shouted sarcastically. It seems that she had been urging Brian to divorce me for some time. She probably came today to find a reason to blame me. I didn't expect her to be so prepared with divorce papers, though. "Hurry up and sign this, and then get out," she demanded sternly. I felt sorry for her, being deceived by Brian's lies and about to let go of her cash cow. I signed the divorce papers, holding back laughter, packed my prepared belongings, and said, "Thank you for everything. I'll submit these papers myself." Then, I left the house. She must have thought I would beg her. She just watched me leave calmly, surprised, muttering, "Lucky me, one less trouble in my life." I immediately submitted the divorce papers to City Hall. Humming a tune, I headed straight to the luxury apartment I had prepared, which cost $3 million, a secret from Brian and his mother. Living alone was very comfortable. I no longer needed to take care of Brian or deal with his mother. I could use all my time for myself, and as a result, started a personal business. I was enjoying my newfound single life, but unfortunately, this peace didn't last long. It seemed that Brian had returned from his affair trip, which he had disguised as a training camp. When he realized I wasn't home, he called me. "Kelly, where the hell are you? Whatever it is, come back right now." "Why should I come back? Your mother told me to leave, so I did as she wished." "My mom? I told you to ignore whatever she says. Just come back, no complaints." "No, I don't want to. We're divorced now. I won't return to a legal stranger's house." "What? Divorce? What are you talking about?" "Your mother prepared the divorce papers. I just signed and submitted them to City Hall. I filed them the day you left, so the process is already complete. This divorce is invalid. Just come back. There's only $500 in the account, and I can't make ends meet. I said no. Since we're divorced, I'm not concerned about your living expenses. If you want to talk in the future, please go through my lawyer. The contact information is in my desk drawer. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Brian had just kept saying, "Come home." I wonder what will happen next. I'm excited to see. A few days later, Brian, through a lawyer, requested a formal discussion. When I arrived at the lawyer's office on the day of the meeting, unexpectedly, his mother was also there. Seeing me, she murmured, "That bag." Noticing the more luxurious bag I was carrying compared to the one that she had bragged about. "You have a good eye, mother. When you have money, you want to have at least one of these. By the way, why are you here?" I asked, and she looked down. "Mom knows everything. That I'm actually a contract worker, that you're running a company, and that you were covering most of the household expenses." Brian began quietly, looking embarrassed. "The divorce papers were prepared by my mother without my consent. I regret what I did, and it's my fault for lying in the first place. I won't let her say bad things about you anymore, so please come back and cancel the divorce." He seemed repentant, but it didn't resonate with me. In reality, it was just lip service. I know he didn't think that he had done anything wrong. He seemed to insist that his mother was the worst in this, and that he was not to blame. "I'm sorry. I can't come back." When I refused, Brian slammed the desk. "It's thanks to me that you became a CEO. Don't you have any gratitude? Since you're divorcing me because of your selfishness, I demand $1 million as compensation." He yelled. This was his true nature. The Brian I once loved no longer existed. In front of me was a pitiful man swayed by money. "Brian, don't say that." His mother tried to stop him, but he seemed lost and didn't listen. Lawyer. When I had come home, Kelly had taken all the belongings and disappeared. The divorce papers were made without my consent by my mother. Kelly's the one who abandoned all her duties as a wife and caused mental harm to my mother and I. Brian pointed at me and appealed to the lawyer. The lawyer sighed in disbelief and pulled out a document. "Kelly has said that she will accept the divorce quietly and won't pursue this matter further," the tired lawyer stated. Brian was shocked and speechless when he saw the document. It detailed his relationship with Allison, including photos of him entering and leaving hotels with her. "I'm grateful for your support in running the company, but I've repaid my debt. You enjoyed a luxurious life with my funds, spoiling your mother and having a good time with your lover." I was surprised it was Allison. "How was your luxurious trip with the woman who tormented me?" I asked Brian this, but he was pale and seemingly frozen. His mother, unaware of the affair, started causing a scene. "What is this? What does this mean?" Ignoring her, I continued explaining to Brian, "If the divorce goes through, I won't ask for any damages from you, or for you to return the living expenses you overspent. However, there will be no division of assets." His mother interrupted, "That's unacceptable. Kelly, actually, I've started renovating our family home." I thought Brian was controlling the finances. "And I've also bought new furniture and appliances. Brian can't make a living in his current state. So, please reconsider the divorce. If not, please help us financially." Brian's mother put forth her unreasonable demand. I was astonished, and so was the lawyer. The lawyer took a deep breath and said, "Well, that's quite audacious, or rather thoughtless. Madam, you have no right to interfere in this matter. Can you please remain quiet?" He then turned back to Brian. "So, what will you do? If you continue to make a fuss, we'll claim damages and also reimbursement for the shared assets you squandered on your mistress. I'll send this evidence to your company as well." My additional remark made Brian slump in resignation. "Then I have no choice but to accept the divorce." He answered in a weak voice. Brian, a contract employee, but proud to be part of a large corporation. indulging in luxury with his wife's money, and worse, having an affair that could lead to job loss if exposed at his company. Wanting to maintain his corporate status, Brian reluctantly agreed to the terms. What about the house renovation? The credit card payment is due soon. Brian, answer me. His mother pressed, but Brian stood up silently, walked out unsteadily, and left the lawyer's office. His mother hastily followed him. I stared at the door they left through, deep in thought. Later, I sent the evidence of Brian's affair to Allison and sought damages from her. Oops, caught me. But Brian's mine now. I'll pay the damages, whatever they are. He's an elite at a big corporation. Allison laughed without a hint of remorse. Apparently, Brian had lied to Allison as well. He told our college friends that I was the CEO, but it seems that Allison didn't know this. When I informed Allison of the actual facts, her smug expression changed as she learned the truth. Initially doubtful, Allison then claimed, "But this means that I was deceived by Brian. I'm the real victim, and you couldn't possibly go against me." But her affair with Brian was a fact. "If you don't pay the damages, I'll send this evidence to your workplace and family," I pressed, and she quickly settled the payment. According to my friends, Allison tends to involve herself with married men and was already caught up in another compensation issue. But whatever happens to her is now none of my concern. Brian still sends me messages hoping for reconciliation. Unable to pay rent and returning to his family, Brian and his mother struggled to lower their living standards, quickly accruing significant debts on top of existing loans. Overworked and sleep-deprived from his job and other part-time work, Brian reportedly kept making mistakes at work. Brian sent me a message that made me laugh. "I've come to understand how much I value you, Kelly. I won't repeat the same mistakes. So let's support each other from now on." I have no memory of receiving any support from Brian after our marriage, so his idea of mutual support is completely mistaken. When I warned through my lawyer that further contact would lead to sending evidence of the affair to his workplace, his messages stopped completely. I'm currently working happily while expanding my business. I have no intention of remarrying for the time being, and I plan to enjoy my single life. This is unbelievable. Did you really just come back for the money? Of course. And it's not unbelievable at all. It's only natural that the beloved grandchild spends money, so it's only right that I be thanked by both grandparents like this. That's why Grandma needs to leave this world sooner. What are you saying? Grandma's asleep right over there. Hey Grandma, can you hear me? Just go already so I can get the inheritance. How could such heartless words be thrown at the grandmother who raised her? I was disturbed to hear such words that made me doubt her heart. Rewind back 20 years ago. My sister Theresa and I, Nicole, had no parents. Apparently they died in an unexpected accident, shortly after I was born. So I only know my parents' faces from photographs. The ones who took us in after we became orphans were our grandparents, my mother's parents. They showered us with unconditional love, but Theresa disliked being raised by them. When she went to junior high, she became so rebellious and was out of control to the point where our grandparents frequently had to apologize for her. She even found that annoying and told our grandparents in no uncertain terms to never show their faces at school events again. Eventually, right about the time that Theresa graduated from university, she took money from grandfather without a word of thanks and left home. I decided to repay our grandparents, including my selfish sister's portion, and continued to live with them even after graduating from university. I planned to take care of our grandparents in the future, so I looked for a job locally and found employment. Since Theresa left, several years have gone by. With the troublesome Theresa gone, my grandparents and I were living peacefully. But suddenly, that happiness crumbled. It was discovered that Grandma had cancer, and we were told that she wouldn't live much longer. I was faced with the reality that Grandma's time was near, and I couldn't help but cry. Grandma comforted me gently. "Nicole, you're so kind. I'm moved by your tears, but I've lived long enough. Grandma always treated my sister and I kinder than anyone else. Encouraged by her words, I was determined to take care of her properly until the last moment. Feeling that Theresa should know, I emailed her about Grandma's cancer. Theresa, who usually never replied to our messages, would surely contact us if she knew about Grandma's condition, or at least I hoped. But that hope was in vain. There wasn't even a reply from Theresa, let alone her coming to see Grandma. Grandma's health deteriorated rapidly. It was clear to me that Grandma didn't have much longer, and while holding back tears, I prepared myself for the inevitable farewell. To show my gratitude, I always kept a smile in front of Grandma and took devoted care of her with Grandpa. Despite the complete lack of communication from Theresa, I continued to update her daily through email for the sake of Grandma, who had always cared about Theresa. Even though Theresa disregarded our grandparents, I kept sending messages hoping to at least show Grandma Theresa's face before the end. Then, after many days had passed, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Theresa, who hadn't been in touch for so long. Next to her stood a man with a flashy appearance, a stranger to me. Seeing my perplexed look, Theresa pointed to the man with irritation and bluntly said, "I got married. This is my husband. I'm Scott," he said with a brief greeting, and without hesitation, Theresa and this Scott walked boldly into the house. Seeing Theresa, who had returned home after such a long absence, Grandpa, who had been relaxing in the living room, exclaimed in surprise, "Theresa, you're back." Sitting on the living room sofa, Theresa asked arrogantly, "So what? How much does Grandma's inheritance come to?" I was so surprised that I couldn't help but speak up. I thought Theresa came to see Grandma, but she seemed to be only interested in the money. "So, how much is it exactly?" Theresa asked again. Scott, sitting next to her, turned to Grandpa and said, "Oh, Grandpa, I'm thirsty," hinting he wanted a drink. Disgusted by the selfish behavior of the couple, I shook my head and said, "I don't know how much. Besides, it's rude to talk about inheritance when Grandma is still fighting for her life. You know Grandma has a fortune, Nicole. If we don't get it sorted while she's alive, we won't get anything, will we?" True, Grandma came from a distinguished family, and her estate had accumulated considerable wealth. That wealth was built because Grandma's father, my great-grandfather, ran a company. Grandma had siblings, and though she never took over the family business, she seemed to have learned about management from her father since she was young. Therefore, after marrying Grandpa, it seems they started a business in Grandma's name and built a fortune worth millions. Theresa and Scott were after that business worth a fortune. This is unbelievable. Did you really just come back for the money? Of course. And it's not unbelievable at all. It's only natural that the beloved grandchild spends money, so it's only right that I be thanked by both grandparents like this. Plus, I'm pregnant. If Grandma leaves this world soon, we can inherit the fortune, and it will even go to her great-grandchild. It's obvious she would be happy about that. What are you saying? Grandma is asleep right over there. The room next to the living room, once Grandpa's workspace, had been converted into a care room for Grandma, who had difficulty moving daily, and our voices were surely reaching her. I explained to Theresa and said, "Don't talk about the money anymore," but she laughed maliciously and shouted even louder, "Hey Grandma, can you hear me? Just go already so I can get the inheritance." That was the last straw for me. "Get out," I yelled as I grabbed Theresa and Scott's arms and dragged them to the door. In my anger, I mustered all my strength and threw both Theresa and Scott, who showed little resistance, out of the house. "Never set foot in this house again. You're being selfish." "I came because you told me to," Theresa mocked. Steam seemed to pour from my head as I shouted back, "If you're going to say such horrible things to Grandma and Grandpa, I wish you had never come. You forget your gratitude and say such cruel words, despite being raised by them so kindly. You're the worst." After slamming the door shut, I bawled in frustration. Grandpa, who had brought juice at Scott's request, noticed me crying at the door. "Are you okay?" When I told Grandpa about Theresa and Scott's actions, he seemed to consider something quietly, then smiled kindly and said, "Don't worry. Grandpa will take care of it. and handed me the juice he was carrying. Time went by, and after a long battle with her illness, Grandma left us. The peacefully sleeping Grandma seemed finally free from the pain of cancer, which eased my feelings a bit. I felt relieved to see Grandma, as if she were sleeping with a peaceful look on her face, finally free from the pain of cancer. I spoke to Grandma's serene face. "You did well, Grandma. Thank you for everything." After the funeral, I returned home to find Theresa and Scott waiting. I had informed them of Grandma's death by email, but they had not shown up at the funeral. When I asked Theresa why they came now, she predictably replied, "It's for the money, of course." We needed to discuss the matter of Grandma's will, so we went into the house and started talking about the inheritance. I was hesitant to talk about the inheritance so soon after Grandma's death, but it seemed Theresa and Scott were eager to get the money as quickly as possible. Theresa pulled out a document from the envelope she brought with a pleased look on her face. "Look at this. It's Grandma's will." "What?" I couldn't help but let out a sound of surprise. But there it was, a will undoubtedly written in Grandma's handwriting. What's more, the content was unbelievable, stating that all the inheritance, including the company, was to be left to Theresa. That was impossible to believe. On the day Theresa visited, Grandma had heard Theresa's cold words and cried in her room. It seems Theresa sees me only as a source of money. Even though Grandma had said such in a sad tone, the will was leaving all her assets to Theresa. I trembled as I muttered, "What is this? Some kind of joke?" To which Scott chuckled. "Based on your surprised face, I guess you were after the inheritance too, weren't you?" You really make me laugh. I don't care about the inheritance. I just can't believe that this will was actually written by Grandma. As I looked at the will with disbelief, Scott mocked, "Don't act like such a goody two-shoes," and Theresa said sarcastically, "She's always been like this. Last time, we were kicked out, but now this house, Grandma's company, and the rest of her assets will be mine, so it's your turn to leave. Grandpa can't stay here either, so take him with you and go." Theresa said this while grabbing my arm and pulled me towards the door. I was overwhelmed by the anger I felt towards Theresa and Scott. Despite Grandma looking lonely at the time, Theresa didn't even show her face. Then she showed up wishing for Grandma to pass away quickly, and now she was about to take all the inheritance. I felt ready to explode. "Stop it!" I cried out, and just then the doorbell rang. Surprised, Theresa loosened her grip on me and I pushed her hand away, looking towards the door. There, I could see a shadow through the frosted glass. When I opened the door, I found Mr. Harrington, the lawyer. Mr. Harrington had visited our house many times before for consultations related to our grandparents' company. "Sorry I'm late," Mr. Harrington greeted, and Grandpa, who had been preparing coffee, welcomed him. We've been waiting." "Okay, let's discuss the will," Grandpa began, but Theresa cut in, showing the will that she had brought. "As it's written here, I've acquired everything, including the company and Grandma's wealth. So actually, the will is already settled. The money has already been deposited in the bank, and I've even withdrawn it," Theresa said confidently. However, Grandpa remained calm and said with a gentle smile, "There's still more to discuss. Theresa, you no longer have the right to inherit the estate." "What?" Theresa looked confused, and frankly, I was also struggling to keep up with the situation. That's when Mr. Harrington inserted a USB memory stick into his laptop and placed it on the shoe cabinet near the front door. A voice recording of Grandma, Theresa, and Scott began to play from the PC. "Come on, hurry up and write the will, Grandma. Write that you will leave all your assets to us. Otherwise, things will get complicated." Understood. As we listened to the recording, it was easy to imagine Theresa and Scott pressuring Grandma to create the will. After stopping the recording, Mr. Harrington explained, "A will made under duress is invalid according to the Civil Code. Therefore, this will has no legal power." Mr. Harrington said this, pointing to the will Theresa was holding. "When did you set this up?" Unable to hide my surprise, Grandpa explained the situation to me. While I was out, Theresa and Scott had come to the house and coerced Grandma into writing this will. I was the one who set up the voice recorder, Grandpa said with a calm smile. Theresa started to panic and muttered, but Grandma had me sign the documents too, to which Grandpa replied by chuckling. Theresa, you really don't understand anything, do you? Did you read the fine print? What you signed was a credit card loan application. Grandma was shocked that you signed it so easily. What? So, the $20,000 I withdrew from the bank is? Yes, a debt. Grandpa replied calmly, and Theresa hurriedly took out her mobile phone to check her account. I can't believe it. My account is in the negative. As she checked her account online, Theresa muttered to herself and began to look pale. Scott was no different. What do you mean, my Ness? What are we going to do? I thought we were going to get the inheritance. So I've already taken out loans for the house and car. This isn't a joke. Scott raised his voice. Calm down, Scott. Mr. Harrington, as I am Grandma's granddaughter. Even if the inheritance is less than we thought, I will still receive some, right? Theresa pleaded desperately. To this, Mr. Harrington replied, I came here to convey just that. And he took out a will from a white envelope. This is a legitimate will based on a notarized document. It's valid, so I will read the contents. He said this as he took the will out from the envelope. Theresa and Scott both put their hands together as if in prayer. However, the will did not mention Theresa's name at all. The company was to be inherited by Grandpa, and the remaining assets were to be shared between Grandpa and myself. Theresa cried out desperately, Why? Can't we do something about this? But Mr. Harrington replied coolly, Nothing can be done. Legally, Theresa, as an heir, had the right to claim the inheritance, but she lost that right by threatening Grandma. To Theresa's question, Can't we do something about this? Grandpa smiled dryly and said, No, there's nothing that can be done. You senile old man. Theresa spat before storming out of the house alone. Scott, who had been left behind, hurried after her, calling, Wait for me, but he was a pitiable sight. Later, I heard that Theresa and Scott had a child, but because of the debt they accumulated, they were unable to take enough parental leave and had to return to work without a break. It seems they had expected to receive a substantial inheritance before Grandma's death and had indulged in luxuries, even going into debt. However, as a result, they were forced to sell their expensive house and luxury car they had bought on loans, and all that remained was a massive debt and the brutal task of repaying it. Theresa and Scott once came begging for help, but Grandpa turned them away coldly. The financial difficulties took a toll on their marriage, and eventually, they divorced. I heard that Scott returned to his parents' home, and Theresa tried to come back to this house, but I refused her firmly. This house is my property, inherited from Grandma, and I won't allow Theresa to live here without my permission. I heard a rumor that Theresa was living under a bridge, financially ruined. But the truth is that her current situation is uncertain. She repeatedly requested my help, but because I couldn't really afford to support her, I continued to tell her, it's impossible. In truth, the inheritance I received from Grandma had already been donated to a children's home. Having lost our parents at an early age, I could deeply empathize with the orphans. If it weren't for my grandparents, Theresa and I would probably have been raised in such a facility, so I donated, hoping to bring a little happiness to the children there. When Theresa came asking for help, I told her about the donation. She was very surprised and said, You should help your own family first, but recalling her past, I had no intention of helping her. Time went by, I got married and was blessed with children. Grandpa seemed content with my happy life and passed away without suffering. Losing Grandpa felt like a hole had opened in my heart, but with the support of my loving husband, I was able to face the world again. Now, I continue my grandparents' legacy, working as a company president and struggling with parenting. I hope to live in a way that would make my grandparents proud, watching over me from heaven.